This is my moral stance on Israel. I'm Barrett, and today I'm going to explain why being anti-Israel is not the same as being anti-Jewish, and in fact, why being anti-Israel is the Jewish thing to do. Before I start, some disclaimers. Disclaimer number one, I'm not a Jewish scholar nor a foreign policy expert, so I'm going to be citing my sources. I've tried my best to vet my sources, and I'd be happy to discuss any of them, and I'll try to discuss any claim I make. Disclaimer number two is about why I'm making this. I'm making this because people are labeled anti-Semitic when they criticize the state of Israel. I'm Jewish, and I want to explain exactly why I think people should criticize Israel. I will also try to explain how labeling people who are anti-Zionist or anti-Israel anti-Semitic actually pushes the idea that Israel is a Jewish state and why that is a bad thing. The overall structure of this presentation is going to be in three parts. Part number one is Israel's actions within or outside of the full context are condemnable. Part number two is going to be Israel is an ethno-state, so should it exist? Part number three is going to be never again. Before I get into it further, I have cut out all of the upsetting imagery. There are upsetting themes, though. There are Nazi salutes, and there is one image of Pete Hegseth's face. So with all that said, let's get started with this Kamala Harris quote.
Because none of us just live in a silo. Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
At the core, my argument is that violence is bad and should be condemned on its own terms. In that sense, I would stand against the genocide in Gaza regardless of the context. But if you do want to put the attack on October 7th, 2023 in context, the zoomed out picture is still one of systematic violence, racism, and oppression towards the Palestinian people. Before I move any farther, I do want to say October 7th was a tragedy. On October 7th, Hamas led raids on Israeli settlers and thousands of people died or were kidnapped in the process. Personally, like I said, the core of my argument is that violence is bad. I disavow violence in all forms, and this was a tragic event. However, to ignore the escalation of the Israeli government leading up to and following October 7th, 2023 is to rewrite history. So here we're going to go through some of the year leading up to October 7th, 2023. Before October 7th, there was a series of escalatory steps taken by the Israeli government and its most far-right citizens. In January 2023, only a few days after the new Netanyahu government came to power, Itamar Ben-Gvir visited the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the mosque where built upon the place where Muhammad ascended to heaven, and in Judaism, I believe that's Temple Mount. Just visiting was dubbed a provocative move. That same mosque would get raided by the Israeli police in April 2023. Here you can see from the NPR reporting, January 4th, a controversial visit, 2023, a controversial visit by Israel's far-right national minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, to a sensitive holy site in Jerusalem. And here we can see the BBC reporting, April 5th, 2023, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was raided by the Israeli police. In February 2023, extremist settlers torched Palestinian houses and cars in an act of vigilante justice. The Israeli Defense Force, IDF, helped evacuate Palestinian families and claimed that they condemned this pogrom. A later CNN investigation, however, found that, quote, not only did the forces fail to stop the riots in Hawara, they did not protect residents as settlers set fire to Palestinian homes and businesses and blocked emergency services from responding. Here you can see some Axios reporting from the day of. Several hours after a shooting attack, settlers attacked the town and set several Palestinian houses and more than 24 Palestinian cars on fire. The Israeli military helped evacuate several Palestinian families, officials said. But here you can see the CNN investigation. Israeli military called the attack a pogrom. Videos show soldiers did little to stop it. Specifically, not only did they fail to stop the riots, they did not protect residents and blocked emergency services from responding. Instead, when residents threw rocks in reaction to the settlers' aggression, Israeli forces fired at the Palestinians with tear gas and stun grenades. By August 18th, 2023, the Palestinian people had already reached a grim milestone, the deadliest year on record for children in the occupied West Bank, with 38 children killed. The record it surpassed was set and tied in 2022. According to the UN statistics, more than one child was killed per week from January to August 2023. Here we have 2022 becoming the deadliest year for Palestinian children in the West Bank in over 15 years. Here we have August 2023, a spike in Israeli killings of Palestinian children. And finally, here we have 2023 marking the deadliest year on record for children in the occupied West Bank. At least 38 Palestinian children have been killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. Finally, just 3 weeks before the October 7th attack, Netanyahu spoke to the UN. He claimed that Palestinians should, quote, stop spewing Jew hatred and finally reconcile themselves to the Jewish state. Put a pin in the idea of a Jewish state. Here we can see the Times of Israel reporting. The Prime Minister did spell out how the Palestinians could become beneficiaries of the process rather than spoilers. Israeli-Palestinian peace requires that the Palestinians, quote, stop spewing Jew hatred and reconcile themselves to the Jewish state, he said. By that, I mean not only to the existence of the Jewish state, but to the right of the Jewish people to have a state of their own in their historic homeland, the land of Israel. Here you can see the map he was holding up to the UN of the new Middle East, notably, no Gaza, no West Bank. These events and many others set the scene for October 7th and showed anyone who cared to see that Israel was escalating tensions and was unwilling to negotiate. In fact, 10 days before October 7th, 2023, September 27th, the UN released a report that starts, quote, pointing to the ongoing expansion of Israeli settlements, demolition of Palestinian structures, daily violence, and continued inflammatory rhetoric by their government representatives, a senior UN official reiterated to the Security Council the Secretary General's appeal for an end to the occupation and a resolution of the conflict. And here I have that source. Many delegates tell the Security Council that the settlement expansion in occupied Palestinian territory violates international law. This was September 27th, 2023, 10 days before the Hamas attack. On and immediately following October 7th, Israel again made decisions to escalate the situation and directly kill Israeli and Palestinian citizens. During the fighting on October 7th, Israeli forces used the controversial Hannibal Directive to open fire on Israeli citizens, killing many. Here you can see just a definition of the Hannibal Directive. The kidnapping must be stopped by all means, even at the price of striking and harming our own forces. From later down that same Wikipedia article. Israeli newspapers including Haaretz, ABC News, and the UN's Commission of Inquiry have all pointed out that the 2023 Hamas-led attack on Israel, that during the attack on Israel, the IDF ordered the Hannibal Directive to be used. The IDF was ordered to prevent at all costs the kidnapping. Haaretz, one of the Israeli newspapers, noted in one case it was known that civilians were hit, which took place in the house of Pessi Cohen at Kibbutz Me'eri. 14 hostages were in the house as the IDF attacked it. 13 of them were killed. The UN report also confirmed some instances of the Hannibal Directive. For example, a tank crew confirmed they had applied the Hannibal Directive when they shot at a vehicle suspected of carrying kidnapped Israeli soldiers. On October 8th, before even securing the border, Israel had already cut power to the entirety of the Gaza Strip and started a bombing campaign on the people of Gaza, making it clear that the goal was never security, but revenge. By October 12th, Amnesty International had already denounced this act of collective punishment. Here you can see the CNN reporting, Israel Hamas-Gaza attack. This is October 8th, 2023. Israel has been pounding Gaza with airstrikes. More than 400 Palestinians have died, and medical care has been complicated by Israel cutting power to the territory. And here's the Amnesty International brief. Israel must lift illegal and inhumane blockade on Gaza as power plant runs out of fuel. Since then, IDF forces have committed multiple war crimes against the people of Gaza. As time has gone on, these tactics have escalated further and further. This is not war as usual. For example, humiliating and physically abusing prisoners of war, which was reported as early as November 2023 and with continued reporting to this day. Consistently targeting areas that Israel itself declared safe zones, reported November 2023 as well. Using starvation as a weapon of war, which was reported as early as December 2023 and also has continued reporting till this day. Using AI that targets children, reported as early as April 2024, although the AI that was targeting children was in use especially at the very beginning of the war. There are also many more examples that I don't have time to get into. So here we have sourcing for all of those claims. This is B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group, describing the Israeli prison system as a network of torture camps. This is the Amnesty International brief, explaining about the horrifying cases of torture and the degrading treatment of Palestinian detainees amid the spike in arbitrary arrests. This is November 8th, 2023. Here's an article from December 2024. Amid a ceasefire push, Palestinians still bearing the scars of Israeli detention. And here we can see, even as of February 2025, the Palestinians being released by Israel are still showing signs of torture and starvation. Here's some sourcing on starvation being used as a weapon of war. This is December 2023. The Human Rights Watch explaining how civilians are being deliberately denied access to food and water. Here you can see that the EU is also making statements saying that starvation is being used as a weapon as of March 2024. And even as of March 2025, Israel is still, again, using starvation as a weapon in Gaza. Here's an Amnesty International brief about the airstrikes. Nowhere is safe in Gaza. Unlawful Israeli airstrikes illustrate callous disregard for Palestinian lives. And here comes a bunch of reporting about Lavender AI, the AI system used to target thousands of women and children in the Gaza war. This is the Independent reporting. Thousands of Palestinians, most of them women and children, or people who were not involved in fighting, were wiped out by Israeli airstrikes, especially during the first few weeks of the war, because of the AI program's decisions. And here I've actually pulled some of the original reporting from 972 magazine. Quote, "We were not interested in killing Hamas operatives only when they were in a military building or engaged in a military activity," an intelligence officer told 972 and Local Call. On the contrary, the IDF bombed them in homes without hesitation as a first option. It's much easier to bomb a family's home. The system is built to look for them in these situations. And from further down that same article, in an unprecedented move, according to two of the sources, the Armory also decided that during the first few weeks of the war, for every junior Hamas operative that Lavender marked, it was permissible to kill up to 15 or 20 civilians. In the past, the military did not authorize any collateral damage. In fact, while I was in the process of compiling this presentation, on March 2nd, 2025, after about 6 weeks of ceasefire, Israel again cut all supplies, including food, to the Gaza Strip. Here's the AP reporting on it. Israel has cut off the entry of all food and other goods into Gaza in an echo of the siege it imposed in the earliest days of its war. March 2nd, 2025. So here I want to get something out of the way. Many of you might be sitting here thinking to yourself, this is all true, but this is a war. Hamas kills people too. Well, you're right. They do. I don't spend a lot of energy protesting or criticizing them for a few reasons. Reason number one, the disproportionality of the violence and the ongoing oppression of the Palestinian people means that even if the next 2 points didn't exist, I would still point to Israel as the greater evil. Number two, Israel can only take its actions because it has American backing, both politically and militarily. Place a guess which country on its own has voted to stop UN ceasefire resolutions 3 times, or which country has sent billions of dollars in military aid to Israel in the midst of cutting billions of dollars from government spending. It was the US. Reason number 3, violence is still ongoing. Israel is currently applying the lessons of Gaza to the West Bank, and as I just discussed, has reapplied their blockade of the Gaza Strip. Here you can see that the latest death toll stands at 62,614 Palestinians and 1,000 people killed in Israel. So 62,000 Palestinians killed and 1,000 people killed in Israel. For the record, it says people killed in Israel, not Israeli, because Israeli is not a nationality. More on that later. Here you can also see that nearly 70% of the people killed in the Gaza war are women and children, verified by the UN. This is just some sourcing on the U.S. blocking the ceasefire call for the third time. Trump backing big arms sales to Israel, billions of dollars to Israel, despite the Congress talking about cutting government spending. Here we can see the Israeli ministers are saying that the army is applying the lessons from Gaza to the West Bank. And they are. 40,000 people have been displaced from the West Bank, and tanks have been deployed for the first time into the West Bank since 2002. They have been also using other lessons that they learned from Gaza, namely cutting off water and power. They've been on and off besieging one of the refugee camps in Jenin, possibly. Here's some sourcing on that as well. So let's return to the question of context. Leading up to October 7th, Palestinian citizens were repeatedly attacked with the help of the Israeli military. Israel had repeatedly signaled to the Palestinian people that it was unwilling to negotiate. With this context, the violence that followed the Hamas attacks is even more unjust. Regardless of the context, however, we should be against this type of horrific violence. So let's move on to question 2. Israel is an ethno-state, so should it exist? Here I'll explain, A, that Israel is an ethno-state, and why B, this is bad. A, Israel is an ethno-state. This one is pretty simple. Israel has made it clear that it thinks that it is an ethno-state, by which I mean a state dominated politically by a single ethnicity. In 2013, the Israeli court declared that there was no such thing as an Israeli citizen. Instead, people would have to be listed as Arab or Jewish. I wonder which category Arab Jews should list. In 2018, the ethno-state was enshrined into law by declaring Israel a specifically Jewish nation-state. Now some American hardliners are joining Netanyahu in returning to the biblical claim on the West Bank, or as they say, Judea and Samaria. So here you can see some sourcing for this. There's no such thing as Israeli nationhood. Israeli people are Jewish. It is a Jewish country. Here you can see the Israeli parliament adopted a law defining the country as a nation-state of the Jewish people, a Jewish country, provoking fears that it will lead to blatant discrimination against its Palestinian citizens. Here you can see recently, West Bank, no, Judea and Samaria, some Republicans say. And here we have Netanyahu reminding its protesters against Israel that Israel is the land of the Bible and has a biblical claim from 4,000 years ago. So, let's move on to claim B. Ethnostates are bad. Israel wants to remain a Jewish state, again, meaning a government controlled by Jewish people. This makes talk of a one-state solution that would include all of Israel's territory unviable, because Jews would become a minority. In this way, Israel is akin to apartheid South Africa, where whites were a minority, so they used force to stay in power. Jewish governance in Israel, too, must be achieved through force. Instead of learning from the past, Israel ignores the lessons of South Africa and attempts to sustain an apartheid. Here you can see that Jewish people are now the minority in the state and occupied territories. I've Googled why you can't have a one-state solution. No one-state solution because it would require assimilation with what critics fear would be an extremely hostile Muslim ruling majority. This rhetoric was echoed in apartheid South Africa, a hostile ruling majority. Here you can see an Amnesty International brief explaining decades of oppression and domination make what Israel's doing to the Palestinians akin to apartheid. But the more insidious reason that Israel existing as an ethno-state is bad is because it muddies the water about who does and who does not support the Jewish people. One of the reasons that I feel compelled to create this piece in the first place is to explain how someone can and should simultaneously support the Jewish people and oppose the Jewish state. But this blurring of the lines works both ways. Some people, like Elon Musk, support the Jewish state, but certainly do not support the Jewish people. Musk can do a Heil Hitler, then post Nazi puns online, then go and speak to the far-right German party about how they should be proud of their heritage and culture. But does that make him anti-Semitic? A Nazi? Nick Fuentes is certainly a Nazi, and he called it a straight-up Sig Heil. No, we need to look up if he supports Israel first. The idea that someone like Elon Musk can simply pander to Israel, a foreign government, to excuse his blatant anti-Semitism is emblematic of the inherent contradictions of the ethno-state. Here we've got the Elon Musk Sig Heil in front of the presidential seal, no less. You can see from that day, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, claims that Elon Musk made an awkward gesture, not a Nazi salute. But again, we appreciate that people are on edge. Well, don't worry, because a few days later, Elon Musk tweeted at 4:30 a.m. all of these Nazi puns, which I will not read out loud. Y'all can read those on your own time. Same day, January 23rd, Netanyahu jumps to Musk's defense over his salute, saying that he was falsely smeared. But I guess to put any doubts aside, Elon Musk came out in front of the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, in an address to the far-right rally that one of the top U.S. Jewish advocates called incredibly dangerous. But this blurring of the lines works the other way as well. Some people, John Ossoff comes to mind, are Jewish and have used their Jewish principles to vote courageously against sending weapons to Israel. And this makes people think that he is losing Jewish support, when in my view, the thing that he is doing is directly the Jewish thing to do. So, with all that said, should Israel exist? Just like the question of context, this question also misses the point, in my view. The Israeli state does exist, and it's currently a violent apartheid regime. When I describe myself as anti-Zionist, I do not mean that the people living in Israel should not have rights. Quite the opposite. I mean that everyone living under the control of the Israeli government deserves rights, no matter their religion, no matter their circumstances of birth. Right now, though, people who rely on the Israeli government are being denied access to housing, food, medical treatment, because of their religion, at the hands of people with Stars of David on their sleeves. And before I move on, I'm going to play a clip of Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for the Palestinian Occupied Territories, answering the same question: should Israel exist?
Do you believe that Israel has a right to exist?
Israel does exist. Israel is a recognized member of the United Nations. Besides this, there is not such a thing in international law like a right of a state to exist. Does Italy has a right to exist? Italy exists. Now, if tomorrow Italy and France want to merge and become Ita France, fine. This is not up to us. What is enshrined in international law is the right of a people to exist. So the state is there, the state of Israel is there, is protected as a member of the United Nations. Does this justify the erasure of another people? Hell no. Not 75 years ago, not 57 years ago, surely not today. Where is the protection of the Palestinian people from erasure, from annexation, from illegal occupation and apartheid? This is what we need to discuss.
Number 3, never again. Let's think a little bit about why we continue to study the Holocaust to this day. The Holocaust is one of the most studied genocides in human history. It teaches us how fallible our societies are, and how easily systems and hierarchies can twist to allow horrible, inhumane behavior. The Holocaust reminds us to stay vigilant. Right now, fascism is rising around the world. The threat is real and immediate. Remember, Hitler consolidated power quickly and used existing pseudo-legal systems to do so. He was appointed chancellor in January 1933, and less than 6 months later, by July, he had banned all trade unions and all other political parties. We learn about the Holocaust so we can ensure that never again will we allow atrocities of this sort to happen. When I say never again, this is not just a dictum. These are not just empty words. For me, these words have real meaning. I was raised on stories of the Holocaust. My great-grandfather used to read the paper, looking at the daily lists of people rescued from the camps after the war, hoping to find any of his family. Eventually, he found a single cousin who made it out. But like many things in this time, never again has taken on two distinct meanings. Some people believe that never again will the Jews allow themselves to be persecuted in this way. This is ahistorical for multiple reasons, but most offensively to me, the idea that Jewish people meekly allowed themselves to be exterminated is completely ahistorical. There were multiple Jewish resistance groups and Jewish uprisings throughout the rise of Nazi Germany. Or number two, and more correctly in my view, never again will the Jews stand by and watch anyone be subjected to this type of cruelty. Remember, first they came for the communists. They did not come for the Jews first. So, is Israel engaging in a Holocaust right now? Just like the question of context and the question about the right of Israel to exist, it doesn't particularly matter what label you want to place on the last year. If you want to call it a genocide, a Holocaust, or a completely disproportionate capital punishment, remember, Israel's killed about 55 times as many people as Hamas. At the end of the day, any of those options is unacceptable because they all are execution of the death penalty for thousands of men, women, and children without trial. The death penalty in any situation is wrong and anti-Jewish, in my opinion. The Reform Jewish movement in the U.S. has also opposed the death penalty since the 1950s, when the URJ, the Union of Reform Jews, resolved, quote, the resort to or continuation of capital punishment either by a state or by the national government is no longer morally justifiable. Rabbi Richard Levy explains it this way: to deny the possibility of finding the image of God in human beings who have committed awful crimes is to declare that those evildoers are more powerful than God, and that they have the power to destroy the very divine image that God gave them. So to wrap up, I'm American. I am Jewish. There's only one side of the war that has claimed over and over that it is engaged in ethnic cleansing to make me safe, while it's dismissed all of the anti-Semitism rising in front of its face like so many Nazi salutes that people are doing right now. When I see Steve Bannon do a Nazi salute and then go get interviewed by the governor of California, that to me shows anti-Semitism rising in America. When a priest gets in front of a crowd and does a Nazi salute, that shows anti-Semitism rising. RFK Jr., who said that COVID was designed to spare Ashkenazi Jews, being in charge of health and human services, is anti-Semitism rising. Pete Hegseth getting appointed to any level of government is anti-Semitism. This guy has straight up Nazi tattoos. The idea that these people are not anti-Semites, but somebody who simply talks badly about the state of Israel, a foreign government, is anti-Semitic is crazy. Even Trump, of course, called Schumer a Palestinian as a slur. He said, Schumer is Palestinian as far as I'm concerned. He's become a Palestinian. He used to be Jewish. He's not Jewish anymore. He's a Palestinian, Trump said. The idea that this statement is not anti-Semitic, but the statement that Israel is committing a genocide is, frankly, shows exactly what's wrong. All around me, I'm watching my country slide towards fascism. The situation in Gaza highlights how people can look at something and then ignore the truth in front of their eyes to feel more comfortable. Now more than ever, we need to take an active role calling out injustice anywhere we see it around us. It is no longer safe to ignore. Here I have just a series of terrifying things that have happened since Trump became president. The Laken-Riley Act passed with bipartisan support. It will require the detention of unauthorized immigrants accused of theft. Trump has expanded the Guantanamo Bay naval station to its full capacity. He's also ordered independent agencies to follow his read of the law, not the court's read of the law. He's appointed loyalists like Kash Patel, like Pete Hegseth, and like many others. He's likened himself to royalty on Truth Social, and he and his cronies have started pushing for an unconstitutional third term. Right now, if you Google third term project, you can read about how some Republican groups are pushing for exactly what that sounds like. And in the midst of all this, the U.S. and Israeli-led proposal for Gaza is neither moral, human, or Jewish. And Palestinian people are being deported for protesting against Israel. In conclusion, never again is now. Free Palestine, call your representatives, remember that everyone is human and we all have the capacity to change for the better. Thank you for listening.